Looks room at the bottom for foundations. I'm also planning ahead for steel, prisms, and plasma exciters. The factory is starting to look like an actual factory instead of a sad little campsite with conveyor belts. Yep, the dark fog are still here and still not that threatening, so I casually delete both waves. They really tried their best. Bless their little mechanical hearts. Or whatever it is that pumps their oil. There are two kinds of Dyson Sphere players in this world. The ones who happily bury resources without a second thought, and the ones who will twist their entire base into a spaghetti nightmare just to avoid burying a single node. I'm somewhere in the middle and have no issues burying this patch of stone. Sue me. I leave plenty of room for what will become my early game bus and set up some storage using depots sitting on top of splitters. This way, my future logistics bots will have easy access to these components. It also lets me cleanly pull off the circuit boards and magnetic coils that I'll need for the next science area. For anyone brand new to factory games, a bus is basically a main highway of conveyor belts that carries materials across your base, and a mall is a big centralized factory that makes all the buildings and components you need. I've unlocked battlefield analysis bases and they're fantastic. For now, I'm mainly using them to place buildings ridiculously fast. They come with their own construction bots, so any blueprint I drop gets built at light speed as long as the materials are available. It's basically cheating, and I'm here for it. With most of the early game components going, it's finally time to build a proper early game mall. That centralized factory I mentioned earlier? Like a starter base, a mall isn't necessary since most of the machines craft in 5 seconds or less. But come on, it's a factory game. I prefer to automate everything possible. Plus, this mall will easily carry me into the mid-game, and I'll pretty much use all of it. Except maybe those liquid storage tanks. I'm using sorters to take off the bus because everything can be placed on water except for the assembling machines and storage depots. The belts and sorters can always be placed on water, and the wind turbines can be placed on water after researching steel. Since the turbines are powering the sorters, that means I don't need to waste foundations making room for this rather large bus. You could use splitters instead of sorters, but that would mean spending precious foundations like some kind of responsible adult. This whole setup is temporary anyways, all of it is getting demolished once I hit the mid-game. I dedicate one of the sections to create electric motors for the Mark II sorters, and future-proof this section for later Mark II and Mark III belts, as well as Mark III sorters. I'll have logistics bots bring in some of the later components, so I make sure to leave room to bring those in. After swatting away the third wave from the dark fog, it's time to finish the smelting and components area and open the floodgates of my miniature automation empire. Since I would rather not play whack-a-bug every 10 minutes, it's time for me to take the fight to them. I drop some wind turbines, slap down a quick turret blueprint, and use the classic creep method, slowly pushing forward, deleting everything in my path, until the planet is finally clear of the dark fog. Of course, this victory isn't permanent. The giant hive that's floating around the star can always send more relay stations. They're like interstellar cockroaches. You can stomp the ones on the floor, but the nest is still up there plotting. While I was out playing Exterminator against the dark fog, the mall has been quietly stockpiling items like a good little factory. We're finally ready to push into the energy matrix. Red science. For red science, I need two things: hydrogen and energetic graphite. The graphite is easy, you just smelt it from coal. We'll come back to that. Hydrogen comes from cracking oil, which splits into hydrogen and refined oil. It sounds simple, but with refined oil, we have our first dreaded byproduct. There are 3 ways to deal with a byproduct in factory games. You either need to use it, kick the can down the road by storing it for later use, or delete it. The preferred method is to use it, but for now, I'll be kicking the can down the road. You have to be careful when storing a byproduct like this, because it's usually all or nothing with these types of recipes, so when one of them eventually backs up, the whole machine stops. Classic factory game betrayal. I also added in some hydrogen storage just in case, but it's not really necessary. Now that hydrogen is flowing, I set up some energetic graphite. Since the components overlap, I also added in some proliferators to the end of this line. I know it can be difficult, but don't worry. Everyone has a hard time saying proliferator. Proliferation is one of the best mechanics in the game. It boosts the output of machines without using extra resources, at the cost of extra power draw.